something's happening. And if you've been paying attention, you've felt it too. Things aren't stable anymore. You walk into a room and forget why. You remember conversations that never happened. Objects appear in places you know you didn't put them. Déjà vu isn't occasional. It's constant. Multiple times, a day, a week. The Mandela Effect isn't a cute internet theory anymore. It's your daily experience. And here's what nobody's saying out loud. It's accelerating. 2025 is different than 2024. Reality glitches are increasing in frequency, in intensity, in undeniability. You can feel it. Your friends can feel it. Even people who never talk about this stuff are starting to notice something's wrong, or something's changing, something's breaking down or breaking through. Let me validate something. First, you're not losing your mind. You're not developing memory problems. You're not going crazy. What you're experiencing is real. The glitches are real. The instability is real. The sense that reality itself is becoming more fluid, more uncertain, more malleable. That's not imagination. That's observation of actual quantum phenomena. You remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, but history says he died in 2013. You remember the Berenstain Bears being spelled Berenstein, but every book, every video, every reference says Berenstain. You remember Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia, but it never did. Officially, these aren't false memories. These are timeline memories, memories from parallel realities that you actually experienced in other versions of your life, bleeding through into this timeline, because the barriers between timelines are weakening, are thinning, are becoming permeable in ways they've never been before. You experience déjà vu so frequently now that it's lost its novelty. It used to be rare, special, weird. Now it's Tuesday. You walk into situations you've experienced before, conversations you've already had, moments you've already lived. Not metaphorically, literally, word for word. Detail for detail, exact, precision. Science calls this a neurological glitch, a misfiring of memory circuits. But what if it's not a glitch in your brain? What if it's a glitch in reality? A moment where timelines overlap, where you're experiencing both simultaneously, where the quantum superposition of realities becomes briefly perceivable. You lose time. You sit down to work, look up. 3 hours have passed, but it feels like 10 minutes. Or you're driving and suddenly you're home with no memory of the journey, the route. You've driven it thousands of times, but this time it's like you jumped from point A to point B without the middle. Science calls this highway hypnosis, automatic behavior. But what if it's timeline jumping? What if in those moments of missing time, you actually shifted from one reality to another, and the gap you can't remember is the space between timelines, the quantum void, where observation hasn't collapsed anything, yet objects disappear. You put your keys in the same place you always put them. You look, they're gone. You search everywhere, nothing. Then later, hours later, days later, they're back in the exact spot you already checked multiple times. You checked there. You're not crazy, but the keys are there now when they weren't before. Science says you overlooked them Confirmation bias, inattentional blindness, but you know, what you saw or didn't see, and what if the keys actually weren't there? What if they existed in a different timeline until that timeline merged with yours? And suddenly, the keys exist here now again. If you're still watching, you recognize this, you've experienced this, maybe all of this, maybe some of this, but enough to know something's happening, something's changing in the fabric of reality itself. And what I'm about to explain will give you the framework to understand why. Let's begin. Let's start with what reality glitches actually are. At the quantum level, reality isn't solid, isn't fixed, isn't one single timeline playing out in linear fashion. Reality is quantum superposition of infinite timelines existing simultaneously, and what we experience as our reality is just one collapsed possibility out of infinite options. Think of it like this: every moment of every day, you're making decisions, choices, observations, and each decision, each choice, each observation creates a timeline split, a branching point where reality divides into multiple versions. In one timeline, you said yes; in another, you said no. Both timelines exist. Both versions of you exist, living out the consequences of different choices. This is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957. Every quantum event creates a split into all possible outcomes, and all of those outcomes are real, are actual, are happening simultaneously in parallel realities that exist right here, right now, just at different frequencies. Now, normally, these timelines remain separate, distinct, non-interfering. You're in one timeline. Another version of you is in another timeline, and you never perceive each other, never overlap, never bleed through, because the quantum barriers between timelines are stable, are solid, are maintaining separation. But what happens when those barriers start weakening? When the separation between timelines starts breaking down? When quantum decoherence, the process that keeps realities separate, starts failing or shifting, you get bleed through, you get overlap, you get glitches. This is what Mandela Effect actually is. Not false memories, not misremembering, but actual memory from parallel timeline that you lived in before shifting to this timeline. You remember Berenstain Bears, because in the timeline you originally came from, it was spelled Berenstain. That was your reality for years, for decades, but then something happened, a quantum shift, a frequency change, timeline merge, and you moved from that reality into this one where it's Berenstain, but your memory isn't faulty, your memory is accurate. For the timeline you came from, it's just not accurate for the timeline you're in now. And here's the thing: this isn't happening to just you, it's happening to millions of people, all remembering the same alternate version of events, the same alternate spelling, the same alternate history. That's not collective false memory. That's collective timeline shift, groups of people moving together from one reality to another. Why would this happen? Why would groups of people shift timelines together? Because consciousness is connected. Because collective consciousness creates consensus reality, and when a large group of people shifts frequency together, they can shift timelines together, moving from one version of reality to another as a collective. This is why Mandela Effect examples are so consistent, why thousands of people remember the exact same alternate version. If these were just random, false memories, they'd be all over the place, different for everyone, but they're not. They're specific, precise, shared because they're actual memories from actual timelines that groups of people actually experienced. Now let's talk about déjà vu. You've been told it's a neurological glitch, a split-second delay in memory processing that makes the present moment feel like a memory, but that doesn't explain the precision, the detail, the exact word-for-word replay of conversations you've somehow already had. Quantum mechanics offers a different explanation. Déjà vu is memory from parallel timeline bleeding through into this one. You're experiencing this moment for the first time in this timeline, but you've already experienced it in a parallel timeline, and the memory of that experience is crossing over, creating the sensation of already having lived this moment. Why does this happen? Because in parallel timelines, events unfold slightly differently, with slight delays, slight variations in timing. So, sometimes you're experiencing an event in this timeline that another version of you already experienced in parallel timeline hours ago, days ago, weeks ago, and that memory crosses over, creating déjà vu. This is why déjà vu feels so specific, so precise, so real, because it is real. It's not your brain malfunctioning, it's your consciousness accessing memory from another version of your life in another timeline that exists parallel to this one, and the barriers between timelines are thin enough for that memory to bleed through, and this is increasing dramatically. In 2025, people who used to experience déjà vu once every few months are now experiencing it multiple times a week, a day. Some people are in almost constant déjà vu state where everything feels familiar, everything feels pre-lived, everything feels like repetition. This isn't pathology. This is timeline convergence. This is multiple realities starting to overlap, starting to merge, starting to become less distinct, less separate as the quantum barriers between them weaken, thin, and in some cases dissolve entirely. Now here's why this is happening now, why 2025 is different than previous years. It's because collective consciousness frequency is rising. The Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic frequency of Earth itself, is increasing from its baseline of 7.83 Hz to higher levels, spiking sometimes into 40 plus Hz. When Earth's frequency rises, human consciousness frequency rises with it. We're electromagnetic beings living on an electromagnetic planet. When the planet's frequency changes, our frequency changes, and when our frequency changes, what we can perceive, what we can access, what timelines we can interact with, all changes. At lower frequencies, timelines remain separate, distinct. Reality feels solid, stable, predictable, but at higher frequencies, timeline barriers become permeable. Reality becomes fluid, malleable, less fixed, and you start experiencing phenomena that were impossible at lower frequencies. Glitches, overlaps, bleed through between timelines. This isn't simulation breaking down. This is reality upgrading. This is consciousness evolution. This is the shift that spiritual traditions have been predicting for decades. The dimensional ascension, the great awakening, the shift from third dimension to fifth dimension. But it's not metaphorical, it's actual frequency shift with actual physical quantum consequences, and the people who are experiencing the most glitches aren't the ones losing their minds. They're the ones who've elevated their frequency first, who've started shifting before the collective has fully shifted there. The early adapters, the forerunners, the ones operating at frequencies that make timeline fluidity perceivable. Now let's connect this to everything we've already covered in this series. In day one, we talked about how you found that video about quantum consciousness. That wasn't random. Your frequency was already elevating, already preparing for what's coming. The reality glitches you're experiencing now are confirmation that elevation is real, is happening, is accelerating. In day two, we talked about 3 a.m. wake-ups, pineal gland activation, downloads from higher consciousness, and one of the things you might have downloaded at 3 a.m. is information about timeline shifts, about reality instability, about what's coming in 2025. Your higher consciousness was preparing you for this moment, where reality itself becomes uncertain. In day three, we talked about repeating numbers, angel numbers, synchronicity codes, and when reality starts glitching, those numbers often increase dramatically because synchronicity is reality confirming that you're aligned with timeline shifts, that you're successfully navigating the instability, that you're on track, even when everything feels unstable. In day four, we talked about the mirror protocol, breaking identity lock, accessing multiple versions of yourself. And when you do that protocol, when you break your fixed identity, you also break your fixed reality. You become more fluid, more flexible, more able to perceive and navigate timeline shifts that were always happening, but you couldn't see. Everything has been building to this selection, activation, awareness, protocol, and now glitching. You're not just learning about quantum reality, you're experiencing it directly through the breakdown or breakthrough of consensus reality itself. Now let's talk about different types of glitches because not all reality instability manifests the same way. Understanding the types helps you recognize what's happening when it happens to you. First type, lost time. You experience time differently than clocks measure. 3 hours feel like 10 minutes, or 10 minutes feel like 3 hours. This is timeline jumping. You're shifting between realities where time flows at different rates. In the reality you jumped from 3 hours past, in the reality you jumped to only 10 minutes past. You experienced the jump as lost time because you're trying to reconcile two different time measurements from two different timelines. Second type, object displacement. Things move, disappear, reappear in impossible ways. You put something down. You know exactly where you look. It's gone. You search everywhere. Then it appears back in the original spot or somewhere you already checked multiple times. This is quantum tunneling at macro scale. The bureau object briefly existed in different timeline, then tunneled back to yours, or you briefly shifted to timeline where the object was in different location, then shifted back, creating the appearance of object moving on its own. Third type, reality flip-flops. Something changes, you notice the change. You tell people about it. Then it changes back. The spelling of a word, the lyrics of a song, the details of an event. It's one way, then different, then back to original, then different, again, unstable, flickering between versions. This is timeline instability. You're oscillating between two or more timelines that are very similar but have slight differences. Reality hasn't settled into one version yet. So you're experiencing multiple versions in rapid succession until one timeline stabilizes as your primary reality. Fourth type, conversation discrepancies. You remember having a conversation word for word. The other person has no memory of it or remembers it completely differently. You're both certain you're right. Both have detailed memory, but the memories don't match. This is timeline merge. You're from timeline where the conversation happened. They're from timeline where it didn't or happened differently. Now you're in the same timeline together, but you brought different memories from different timelines, creating discrepancy that neither can resolve. Now here's the controversial part: simulation theory versus quantum multiverse. A lot of people experiencing these glitches conclude we're living in a computer simulation, and the simulation is glitching, breaking down, showing its code, its structure, its artificial nature. But that's not what's happening. We're not in a simulation in the traditional sense of computer code running on hardware. What we're in is quantum reality, where observation creates form, where consciousness collapses possibilities, where multiple timelines exist simultaneously. In superposition. The glitches aren't bugs in code. They're features of quantum mechanics. They're what happens when consciousness frequency rises enough to perceive the quantum nature of reality that was always there, but operating below perceptual threshold at lower frequencies. Simulation theory is comfortable explanation for people who can't yet accept that consciousness is primary, that matter is derivative, that we're not in something created by external programmers, but we're creating reality ourselves through collective observation, through frequency, through consciousness itself. The truth is more empowering and more terrifying than simulation, because if we're in simulation, we're passive recipients of someone else's program, but if we're in quantum reality, we're active creators, and the glitches are showing us that our creation powers are increasing, are becoming undeniable, are breaking through old limitations. Let's talk about why your personal frequency creates glitches. Remember, from day one, observation collapses quantum possibilities into reality. When your frequency is low, fixed, rigid, you collapse the same reality over and over. Everything feels stable, predictable, solid, because you're consistently collapsing the same timeline. But when your frequency elevates through the protocols, through the activations, through the awareness, you start collapsing different possibilities, different timelines. Your observation becomes less fixed, more fluid, more capable of accessing multiple realities simultaneously. And when you're operating at higher frequency than the collective around you, you're collapsing realities that don't match their reality. You're in different timeline than they are, even though you're physically in same space. This creates discrepancies, inconsistencies, glitches in consensus reality. You remember something they don't. You experience something they didn't. You see something they can't, not because one of you is wrong, but because you're literally in different timelines, different frequencies, different collapsed realities, occupying the same physical space. This is why people at higher frequencies often feel isolated, misunderstood, like they're going crazy because their reality doesn't match the collective reality anymore. The glitches they experience aren't validated by people still operating at lower frequencies who aren't experiencing the same phenomena. But the good news is, as collective frequency rises, as more people shift into higher frequencies, the glitches become more widespread, more acknowledged, more accepted as real phenomena that can't be dismissed as individual malfunction. And that's what's happening in 2025. The tipping point has been reached. Enough people have elevated frequency that consensus reality itself is shifting, is becoming more fluid, more quantum, more obviously not solid or fixed at all. The simulation isn't breaking down. The illusion is breaking down. The illusion that reality is solid, is fixed, is happening to you, instead of through you, and as that illusion breaks, the quantum nature of reality becomes undeniable, perceivable, experienceable by more and more people every day. Now let's talk about the practical side. What do you actually do when reality starts glitching? How do you navigate timeline instability? How do you stay grounded when consensus reality is breaking down? First and most important, don't gaslight yourself. Don't let anyone gaslight you when you experience a glitch, when you remember something different, when you notice reality shift. Trust your perception, trust your memory, trust your experience. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not malfunctioning. You're perceiving actual quantum phenomena that most people can't see. Yet the biggest mistake people make is doubting themselves. When reality glitches, they immediately assume they're wrong. They're misremembering, they're confused, they're tired, but that self-doubt is programming from lower frequency reality, where consensus was more important than individual perception. At higher frequencies, individual perception becomes more accurate than collective consensus, because you're accessing information that the collective can't access. Yet you're seeing timeline shifts that others haven't noticed. You're experiencing reality fluidity that others are still denying. So, document everything. This is essential. Keep a glitch journal. Every time something doesn't match your memory, every time reality seems different, every time objects move, time feels wrong, conversations don't match, write it down immediately before your rational mind tries to explain it away. Here's the protocol for glitch documentation: date, time, location, what exactly happened, what you expected versus what you experienced, who else was present, what they remember, your emotional state, any unusual circumstances. Write all of it without judgment, without analysis, just facts, just observation. Over time, patterns will emerge. You'll notice that glitches happen more often at certain times of day, after certain practices, during certain emotional states, in certain locations. These patterns reveal when you're most likely to shift timelines, when your frequency is most elevated, when quantum barriers are thinnest. You'll also notice that some glitches are personal, unique to you, and some are collective, shared by many people. When you find others experiencing the same glitch, the same reality shift, the same Mandela Effect, that's confirmation that timeline shift was real, was collective, was significant. This is why community validation matters. Find others who are experiencing this, talk about it, compare notes, build database of augur shared glitches. This isn't just for comfort, it's for accuracy, for understanding. which shifts are personal and which are collective, which affect just you and which affect entire groups. And here's something important. The more you acknowledge glitches, the more you'll experience them. Not because acknowledging creates them, but because acknowledging tunes your awareness to perceive them. They're always happening, but most people filter them out, explain them away, return to consensus reality automatically when you stop filtering, when you start paying attention, when you trust your perception over consensus, and the mind on glitches become obvious, undeniable, frequent, and that's good. That's not pathology. That's awareness. That's perception expanding beyond the limited bandwidth most people operate within. Second, protocol grounding. When reality feels unstable, grounding becomes essential. Not to deny the glitches, not to return to fixed reality, but to maintain your center while reality shifts around you. There's a difference between being grounded and being rigid, between stability and fixedness. Grounded means you're connected to your body, to your breath, to your presence, while allowing reality to be fluid. Rigid means you're clinging to one version of reality, denying all others, refusing to perceive shifts because they threaten your sense of stability. You want grounded fluidity, stable flexibility, present while reality shifts. Here's how physical grounding. Stand barefoot on earth. If possible, feel the ground beneath your feet. Feel gravity pulling you down. Feel your weight, your solidity, your physical presence. This anchors you in your body while timelines shift. Breath grounding. Slow, deep, intentional breathing. 4 count in, hold. 4 count out, hold. 4. This regulates your nervous system. Signals safety, brings you back to present moment, which is the only moment that's actually real, regardless of which timeline you're in. Sensory grounding. 5 senses. Exercise. Name 5 things you can see. 4 things you can touch. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. This brings your awareness back to immediate physical reality, whatever timeline you're in right now. When reality glitches, when you feel disoriented, confused, uncertain which timeline you're in, do these grounding practices. They don't deny the glitch. They don't explain it away. They just stabilize you so you can navigate the shift consciously instead of panicking. Third, protocol. Using glitches as confirmation. This is advanced but powerful. Instead of fearing glitches, instead of being disturbed by them, see them as feedback, as confirmation that you're successfully shifting timelines, that you're frequency is elevated, that you're on track every time you experience a glitch. Acknowledge it, thank it, see it as universe confirming you're moving, you're shifting, you're not stuck in one fixed reality anymore. The glitch is proof of timeline navigation, of frequency elevation, of conscious evolution happening in real time. This reframe changes everything. Instead of reality instability being frightening, it becomes exciting. Instead of glitches making you question your sanity, they confirm your power. Instead of feeling like victim of breaking reality, you feel like conscious navigator of quantum possibilities. And when you shift your relationship with glitches from fear to empowerment, you actually experience fewer disturbing glitches and more synchronistic confirmations, because your frequency determines what type of reality shifts you experience. Fear, frequency, collapses, disturbing, shifts, empowerment, frequency, collapses, confirmatory, shifts. So the protocol is notice the glitch, document it, ground yourself, then reframe it. This is confirmation. I'm shifting timelines successfully. This is proof my frequency is elevated. This is evidence the protocols are working. Reality is responding to my consciousness. This is what I wanted. This is what I've been working toward. When you do this, when you see glitches as positive feedback instead of negative disruption, the entire experience transforms. You're no longer passive victim of reality breaking down. You're active creator of reality, breaking through to higher frequencies, higher possibilities, higher timelines. Now let's talk about community validation, because one of the most isolating aspects of experiencing reality glitches is feeling like you're the only one, like nobody else sees what you're seeing, like you're going crazy, alone. But you're not alone. Millions of people are experiencing this right now in 2025. Find your people online, communities, forums, groups, where people discuss Mandela Effects, reality, glitches, timeline, shifts. These aren't conspiracy theorists. These aren't crazy people. These are conscious observers documenting real phenomena that mainstream science hasn't caught up to yet. Share your experiences. Compare notes. When you find others who remember the same alternate version, who experienced the same object displacement, who felt the same timeline jump at the same time, that's powerful validation. That's confirmation. You're not imagining this. You're perceiving actual quantum reality shifts. But be discerning. Not every online community is healthy. Some feed on fear, on paranoia, on victim consciousness about reality breaking down. Avoid those. Look for communities that approach this from empowerment, from curiosity, from scientific and spiritual integration, from the understanding that this is evolution, not collapse. The goal isn't to convince anyone who isn't ready. The goal is to find others who are already experiencing this, already awake to timeline fluidity, already navigating quantum reality consciously. Those are your people. Those are the ones who will validate your experience while helping you navigate it wisely. And here's something important. Don't try to wake up people who aren't ready. Don't force this information on friends, family, coworkers who are still operating at lower frequencies. They will think you're crazy. They will gaslight you. They will worry about your mental health, not because they're bad people, but because they can't perceive what you're perceiving yet. Wait for them to come to you when they start experiencing glitches, when they start questioning reality, when they start noticing things don't add up. Then you can share what you know, what you've experienced, what you've learned, but not before they're ready, not before their frequency has elevated enough to handle this information. Now let's address what happens when glitches become too intense, too frequent, too destabilizing. Because for some people, reality, fluidity, can become overwhelming, can create anxiety, can make daily life difficult to navigate. If this happens to you, it's okay to slow down, to ground more deeply, to return to stability. You don't have to be on the cutting edge of timeline shifting all the time. You don't have to experience maximum glitches to be evolved. Sometimes the wisest thing is to stabilize, to integrate, to let your system catch up with the shifts that have already occurred. Signs: you need to ground more deeply. Constant anxiety about reality, inability to function in daily life, feeling like you're losing your mind, difficulty distinguishing between timelines, severe dissociation that doesn't subside. If you experience any of these, stop seeking glitches, stop focusing on timeline shifts, return to physical reality. Practices: grounding, intensification, protocol, spend time in nature daily, barefoot, on earth, hands in soil, body in water. This reconnects you to physical reality, to stable frequencies, to Earth's baseline that doesn't shift as rapidly as human consciousness. Physical exercise, heavy lifting, running, yoga, anything that demands full presence in your body. This brings awareness back from quantum possibilities into physical form, into here and now into the reality that requires your attention right now, routine and structure. When reality feels too fluid, create deliberate structure. Same wake time, same meals, same practices, same schedule. This creates stability through repetition, through predictability, through anchoring in daily rhythm that grounds you while timelines shift, limit, stimulation. If glitches are overwhelming, reduce screen time, news, consumption, social media, scrolling. These activities keep consciousness scattered, ungrounded, overstimulated. Create space for quiet, for stillness, for integration of what's already shifted, and if necessary, seek professional support. Not every therapist will understand timeline shifts, but good therapists can help with anxiety, dissociation, grounding, even if they don't share your framework for what's causing it. Your mental health matters more than being on the cutting edge of consciousness evolution. Now let's talk about what comes next as reality glitches continue to increase throughout 2025 and beyond. This isn't temporary. This is the new normal, or more accurately, this is the new fluid reality where fixed and normal no longer apply as concepts. More people will wake up to this. More will experience glitches. More will question consensus reality. More will access timeline fluidity. And as more people shift, the collective reality will shift, will become more obviously quantum, more obviously malleable, more obviously consciousness created. This will be disruptive to systems built on fixed reality assumptions. Governments, corporations, institutions, all operating as if reality is solid, as if history is fixed, as if consensus can be maintained through authority. All of that will become increasingly difficult as individual perception becomes more accurate than collective narrative. But this is positive. This is liberation. This is humanity waking up to its creative power, to its quantum nature, to its ability to navigate timelines consciously, instead of being trapped in one fixed reality, told what to believe, what to remember, what is real. Your role in this is simple. Stay grounded. Document your experience. Trust your perception. Find your community. Don't gaslight yourself. Don't let others gaslight you. Navigate consciously and help others when they're ready to wake up to this. You're not going crazy. Reality is going quantum. And you're one of the first to perceive it, one of the first to navigate it consciously, one of the first to access timeline fluidity that will eventually become normal for everyone. You're not broken, you're forerunner, you're not losing your mind, you're expanding it beyond the limits. Most people still operate within the glitches are real. The timeline shifts are real. The Mandela effects are real. Your memory of alternate versions is real. Your experience of reality, instability, is real. Trust that. Document it, navigate it consciously, and know that you're not alone. Millions are experiencing this with you right now. So let's integrate everything. You now understand what reality glitches actually are: timeline, bleed through, quantum barriers weakening, multiple realities overlapping in ways that were impossible at lower frequencies. You now understand that Mandela effects aren't false memories, they're real memories from parallel timelines you actually experienced before shifting to this one. You now understand that déjà vu isn't brain malfunction, it's memory from parallel timeline bleeding through, because timeline barriers are thinning. You now understand why this is happening now. Collective frequency rising, Earth's Schumann resonance increasing, consciousness evolution accelerating, reality becoming more obviously quantum, more obviously fluid. You now have the protocols document glitches without judgment, ground yourself when reality feels unstable, trust your perception over consensus, find community, validation, use glitches as confirmation. You're shifting successfully and you know when to slow down, when to ground more deeply, when to seek support. And you understand the connection to everything we've covered: selection, activation, awareness, protocol, and now glitching. You're not just learning about quantum reality, you're living it, you're experiencing it directly through the breakdown of fixed reality assumptions that kept you limited for so long. Here's what happens next: you start noticing more glitches, not because they're increasing, but because you no longer filtering them out, you repaying attention, you're trusting your perception, you're documenting, you're sharing with others who see what you see, and your reality becomes more fluid, more responsive, more obviously created by your consciousness, not happening to you, but happening through you. The timeline shifts become more intentional, more aligned with what you actually want to experience, instead of random, instead of disturbing. You stop being victim of reality, breaking down. You become conscious. navigator of reality, breaking through to higher frequencies, higher possibilities, higher timelines that were always available but inaccessible at lower frequencies where most humanity has been operating until now. Before we close, leave a comment right now. Type "I've noticed reality glitches," and if you're comfortable, share one example. What type of glitch have you experienced? Mandela Effect, Déjà vu, lost time, object displacement. This creates community. This validates others. This builds database of collective experience that can't be dismissed. If you've made it this far, you're ready for what comes next. Most people will never acknowledge reality glitches, will explain them away, will cling to fixed reality assumptions because timeline fluidity is too threatening to their identity, to their worldview, to their sense of control. But you're not most people, and the next video takes this to its logical conclusion. If multiple timelines exist, if reality is fluid, if consciousness creates experience, then your parallel selves in other timelines aren't separate from you. They're reaching out, they're merging, they're trying to communicate, and some of you have already felt this. That video is about parallel self merge, how to integrate with other versions of yourself from other timelines, how to access their skills, their memories, their experiences, how to become more than one self, how to operate as multidimensional being instead of limited single timeline identity. That video will appear on your screen in a moment, but before you click, take a breath, feel what shifted in you during this video. You're different now. You see reality differently. You trust your perception more. You understand the glitches aren't problems. They're confirmations. Tonight, tomorrow, this week, when reality glitches. Don't dismiss it. Don't explain it away. Don't doubt yourself. Document it. Ground yourself. See it as confirmation. You're navigating timelines successfully. You're not stuck in fixed reality anymore. You're fluid. You're quantum. You're free. I'll see you in the next one. Keep observing, keep documenting, keep navigating the timelines that are yours to experience.